Since there's no dais this morning, I'll just go ahead and stand up to welcome you all, get it started. Thank you all for coming out this morning and being here. I hope that we all approach this much the way we did last year. There should be no fear. There should be no, gosh, I got to get in there and I got to fight for this or fight for that. They want to take this away from us. That's not why we're here. We're here to talk about how we can work together as a team, City Council and our team members, to make our local government run more efficiently, more cost effectively, more innovatively, and provide the best, the fastest, and the most streamlined service to our citizens that we can possibly provide. And we all know that over the years, we've got a lot of programs that have been there a long time, and maybe there are some things in our local government that we wouldn't start doing today if we weren't already doing them. So we want to have a forum where we can talk about those things today. And I know city managers ask many of you to do that already and to do those now with your staff, and I've seen some of those results, and I just want to tell you I really appreciate that, because I know, and the council does, because I know you've already had some hard conversations within your departments about different things and ways we can do things differently. And I want you to know that today we're free to have those discussions again. No one should be worried about what we're going to talk about today. This is an open discussion, much like it was last year. We had a really good session and everyone was participating. But more than anything today, I just appreciate you all being here, coming prepared, and being part of our team, because we've already done so much after the hurricanes to put, as I tell folks, put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And you have done an amazing job. You are the pride of Clearwater and an example to the rest of the country how to recover your city from a disaster. We thank you for that, and we look forward to today's session. And I'll turn it over to City Manager to introduce our facilitators and get us going.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning, team. Very excited to be here today. I know all of us thoroughly enjoyed, and I'm not being sarcastic, we really enjoyed last year's retreat. This one is a little different, as that this is serving as our strategic planning session, and the goal, we have a lot of goals today. I know that we will achieve all of them. This is a great council, and so we're excited about what's going to happen today. The focus, just as a reminder, is going to be more on budget strategy. We have completed a budget exercise in response to council's conversations and direction from the dais, where we wanted to do some belt tightening, so to speak. The team has done a phenomenal job. I've sent you all a memo that outlines some of those things, along with the outcomes that we achieved by doing that. And so while that will certainly be a part of the conversation today, really what we need in order to make sure that we are developing a budget that we will submit to you all later on this year, that it is at the philosophy and the strategies that you want us to accomplish. And so we need to focus on that bigger picture more so than some of those the details in terms of how we're going to accomplish that. So with that, I am going to introduce our speakers. I know you all have had one-on-one conversations with them, but for the good of the group, we have with us today the FCRC Consensus Center. The center was created by the Florida legislature back in 1987 out of Florida State. It's been around for a long time. The center has received national accolades and awards for its innovative work. They assist public and private interest in designing and conducting consensus building, strategic planning, dispute resolution services. So they're well suited to be here and assist us today. Specifically with us, we have Harold Hall. He is the director of the center. Has been with them since 2019. And while, yes, he is a graduate of Florida State, for those of you that's important to, he also got his Juris Doctorate from the University of Florida, so go Gators. In addition, we have with us Raphael. He is the associate director. Yes, also having graduated from Florida State, and no Florida college there, but certainly appreciate you both being here today. You've been a pleasure to work with thus far. We've done a lot of work to get ready for today, and so with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you, Jennifer. And while we had some individual conversations with each member, just briefly for the rest of you, I'm Hal Beardall. This is Rafael Montalvo, just to distinguish us. I have actually been with the Consensus Center since 1998, believe it or not, but the director since 2019. And Rafael, I hate to say, has been there even longer than I have. He doesn't want to admit it for years. The only thing, thank you, Jennifer, for that. One thing I will note is that when the legislature created our organization back in the late 1980s, it was put at the university in order to be a neutral in these conversations. We are not in any state agency or governor's office or anything. We're at the university so that we can step out into these kinds of conversations. We don't have a stake in the outcome. We're not professors with research that you'll just sit there and listen to me, I'll tell you what the answer is. We're not consultants who are going to come in and provide you with a map or whatever. We're process guys. Our role is simply to help have the conversation. So most of our role today is really just encouraging and keeping you guys hopefully having the most efficient conversation that you can in the conversation today. Something I missed?
The only thing I would add is, as Hal just described, we're in the university because it's a neutral venue. We're actually not otherwise affiliated. We're not academics, we don't teach, we don't research. This is all we do.
We're an odd duck to the university. They don't sometimes know quite what to do with us. Well, let me go ahead then and get us started. You should have, and I'll apologize to those of you if I'm focusing this way. We're going to try and keep the conversation here at the table. I appreciate all of you being here because I know they may have questions that you all have the expertise to help guide them. You should have 4 pieces of paper in front of you. One is the agenda. One is a summary of those interviews that we did with all 5 of you. And another is just sort of a decision worksheet that's what we're going to use to guide the discussion a little later. Do they need?
Yeah, there are 2 of them more here. I'll get it.
Sorry, there's one set.
Highest bidder?
We're close, we can share.
Jennifer, I think we have one set. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
And then the 4th piece that's there is just at the end of the day, we always like to have sort of an evaluation form. We want to hear from you because we've talked about, depending on how the day goes, we've talked about trying to then have a follow-up meeting at the end of February, and it's a chance for you guys to say, well, this worked, this didn't work, what you might want to do at the next meeting. That, we'll wait and do that at the end. The point today on the agenda, obviously the welcome, we're going to review the interviews that we had with you. We'll look over, we're going to have quite an amount of background information from staff to help with these conversations. And then we'll try and focus the vast majority of your time on having some conversations. Now, there are 2 parts to that conversation. One was the upcoming challenges. Well, staff has done an awful lot of work already and already briefed you on some of that, so I'm not sure we'll wait and see if you want to spend any time with that or not, how much time. I'm assuming that hopefully there won't be that much time with that, and we'll be focusing more on the conversation I think you're really most interested in having, which is sort of the long-term strategy for addressing future budget challenges. I think that's what we heard in the conversations. Did I leave anything out of the agenda? No. And trust me, we will not be offended if you got to go get another cup of coffee or whatever as we go. I don't have a break built in here, but my guess is at some point in the middle of this, maybe after presentations and before we get into the longer conversation, we can take a brief break. I'll leave that up to you guys on how you feel.
The 2 old men up here would appreciate that.
So. Well, I can tell you, I'm right there with you, now that I have that big cup of coffee. Can y'all hear me? Okay, perfect. I project, but I'm never quite sure if I'm projecting in the wrong direction. All right. So let me go ahead, if there are any questions about that, of anything? All right. If not, then let me get you to look at the summary of the initial interviews. And for those of you in the audience, we had one-on-one conversations, Zoom conversations with each of the members, an average of about 45 minutes. It was pretty broad questions, more us to introduce ourselves and for them to give us some insights before we started today. And so we have this summary that's ours. It's not going to be everything you said, but it's generally tried to capture much of what all of you said. I'll focus here on the themes. And you'll note that in the themes, some of them say all members, some of them say some members. Even where it says some members doesn't mean those who didn't mention it didn't like that or agree with it, it just didn't come up in our conversation. So when it says all members, it's something that came up as part of the conversation with each of you. For example, you have the first one is a perception of similar or compatible approaches to fiscal policy or issues. All of you described yourself as fiscally conservative. And you believed your colleagues shared that orientation. Very pleasant to see, very high level of mutual respect, and you all felt you had a good relationship with each other and felt comfortable sharing your views with each other, and that good relationship was a good foundation, both personally and professionally. The wants and needs was a consistent theme among the conversations we had, distinguishing between wants and needs. And you all sort of said there is a need to do that. Now, identifying those may be a little variation on how you saw those, where some were more focused on what you felt were essential services. Others, spending would complement or enhance the economic life or quality of life in the city. And others looked at opportunity costs, being sure that if you, where you are in a project, about certain investments, making sure you're taking full advantage of those. You talked a little bit, members discussed a number of tools for the short-term budget needs, which had to deal with the millage rates and immediate budgets. But you also talked about needing capital spending over longer periods of time. So, how you address some of those shorter terms with vacancies or limiting overtime, or there's new sources of fees that perhaps you need to explore. On the back side of that page, several of you talked about kind of a cultural change at a higher level of sort of innovation. Maybe we need to look at some things that have traditionally been done and maybe look at it with a new set of eyes and an approach. The recognition of a need to seek points of commonality and compromise. You explicitly acknowledged you need to develop sort of a common approach. And I think that's sort of where we're trying to go by the end of today, is get a sense from you in that longer conversation of where you want to approach budgets in the longer term. And the last one there is almost all of you, or all of you, noted, as the mayor said even at the beginning of this meeting, a really high respect and appreciation for the skill of the staff, the value of that staff work, and the importance of staff morale. Any questions any of you have about any of that? Does that sound like the conversation you had with us? And want to be sure. All right. Yeah. Go ahead.
The only thing I'll add is we were really focused on the themes that were most directed under the process today. Several of you talked about individual projects and other issues as well. That's not in there. It wasn't the focus of of what we were hoping to hear. You'll have lots of opportunity to talk about those going forward in your budget process.
I will note two other really quick things, just process-wise. Raphael and I have already started doing this. We tag team quite a bit on these conversations. But we'll also be taking some notes for our purposes on one of our laptops in order to help provide you with sort of a summary of the conversation as we as facilitators heard that conversation too during the day. And we may be switching off as we go through the day. So, anything else before I then say we turn it over to staff for backgrounds?
No, staff will lead you through the background presentations. Hal and I, our focus for today is the budgeting strategy, the approaches.
Which is that discussion piece.
The information you're about to hear gives you so many opportunities to go down different rabbit holes, which are very important in and of themselves. Hal and I will just, while your staff is taking you through this information, we'll just play rabbit hole, please, and ask you to maybe hold some of that for later.
It's a fine line between questions of clarification and delving deeply into a project or something, so
We'll
try
ask
to
for
be
your
helpful.
indulgence in advance.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, Kayleen Castle, Budget Director. As part of Council Policy 3-11, we're required to hold a strategic planning meeting in advance of the budget process. So as a refresher, we're just going to go through a few slides about the strategic plan and then some background information on the current budget. Our strategic plan was adopted by the council in May of 2023. It established a new vision and mission that we as city staff incorporate in the work that we do every day for our community. The plan covers 5 policy priority areas and 22 objectives that guide the allocation of resources, prioritization of operating and capital projects, and furthers our goals of strategic decision-making and transparency. The continued implementation of our plan remains a top priority of each department. Our implementation strategy reinforces the success of this multi-year planning process that culminated in this current strategic plan. We're still in the deployment phase. This focuses on aligning department processes and capital projects to the priorities and values of our plan. And under the direction of the city manager, the strategic plan is reinforced at all levels of the organization. And this starts at new hire orientation. And it's also highlighted in our new Executive Leadership Academy that was created this year. Our team engagement efforts continued at the annual health fair, where city management and senior leadership talk with employees about our work plan projects. And the goal of this is just simply to encourage our employees to recognize how their hard work every day furthers the city's strategic plan, vision, mission, and values of the city. They are the foundation of the plan. Our employees are the foundation of the plan. We recognize that this cannot be accomplished without them, and it's a phenomenal team of hardworking employees, and you mentioned that this morning, Mayor. Staff launched the I Make Clearwater Thrive campaign in 2023, which remains an ongoing internal campaign designed to reinforce to employees how their work is tied to the city's overall vision, mission, and values. And soon you'll be seeing some videos from our employees documenting how their day-to-day work furthers the continued success of our city. So we're really excited about that. That was a contest we had at the health fair, and those videos will be published soon.
Awesome.
As part of deploying our strategic plan, a critical element remains measuring the plan's performance over time. So new for 2025, staff has developed a dashboard that measures key projects and operating initiatives throughout the city. This includes quarterly project updates, funding sources and amounts, and demonstrates the work plan items' alignment with a specific strategic objective. This dashboard continues to reflect our mission toward public transparency in the process of our work plan.
So last year when we did this our retreat in April. And so at that point, we were further along in our budget process, and we spent a lot of time talking about our strategic plan, the work plan. This is January, almost February, but it is January, and so we aren't there yet to be able to provide you with a work plan. We need a direction from today. So that's, I know you all, many of the council members are new to this, and so this is our first strategic planning session, but we will use the information. That's why we got to get the budget philosophy on this. We will use the information that we gather from today, the consensus that's provided, to then create our work plan, and we'll update this on our work plan for the next year. So just so you know how the process went. I know, so last year we were talking about it, but that was April. So we're not ready to do that yet. Any questions?
Will this dashboard be facing internally and externally, or only internally?
Our goal is to have it facing externally once we're done with it. So we're still in the creation of it. This is not one that was on our original plan. We were focused on departmental ones. But then when the team demonstrated what they were capable of in making this, this is by far my favorite dashboard that we have. We added this to the list. So yes, it will eventually, and in the near term, be public facing. Right now, it's internal facing.
Thank you.
No problem.
And it's updated to the point of, a few months ago. And so you'll see in the conversation today that there's going to be changes made. And so it doesn't reflect anything that we're going to continue to talk about today that we already know. The next 2 slides include a review of the city's budget in order to provide some additional background for today's conversation. This slide represents the city's total budget by fund type for fiscal year 25, and this is the same slide as presented to you in September when the budget was adopted. Although not shown here for our first quarter budget review and amendments, you'll see an increase of $4.3 million in the general fund. And this represents allocation of fund reserves for the Drew Street project, which was $2 million, and salary increases of the newly approved public safety union contracts. Both of these were approved by council over the last few months, and again, they'll be formalized as part of that first quarter review. The fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget for all city funds is $753,521,697. Our operating funds and special revenue funds total $600,682,997, and capital improvement funds are budgeted at $152,838,700. In total, this is an increase of less than 1% from the 23-24 amended total city budget. This slide shows the general fund expenditures by category over the last few years. For the historical years, fiscal year 20 through fiscal year 24 on this slide, actual expenditures are shown versus the current year, fiscal year 25, which is budget. Over the last few years, we've put significant focus on personnel with several salary studies implemented to bring our wages in line with the local market. 50% of the total general fund growth from fiscal year 20 to the current fiscal year 25, again, that's just 20 versus 25, is associated, 50% of that growth is associated with personnel costs. For that investment in adjusting wages, I want to share some of the good things we've realized. Following the implementation of the council-approved compensation and classification study that was implemented in January of 2024, this brought employee wages to the 75th percentile of comparators. We have observed a 17% decrease in employee turnover, a 14% decrease in the time taken to fill vacancies, and a 38% increase in the number of applicants received for job advertisements proportionate to the number of advertisements. In the years shown here, there's been growth in operating expenses related to significant increases in insurance costs, inflationary increases in supplies, and in fiscal year 21, new operating costs for Crest Lake Park that was reopened after a major renovation. And in fiscal year 24, new operating costs for Coachman Park that was reopened in 24. In fiscal year 23, we began budgeting debt costs of $1.8 million for Imagine Clearwater bonds. And the other largest increase is related to capital expenditures, capital project expenditures. We have an aggressive work plan that we've been discussing, several major building renovations, road projects, and we've also had to respond to the increased construction costs over the last few years. Our annual contribution to projects is more than double the annual contribution from 5 years ago. So our challenge with the budget is trying to manage the growth in expenditures versus limited growth in revenues. We've heard your concerns, and we're focused on developing the budget for next year with constraint in mind. And although we're early in the budget process, we've identified some strategies that we plan to include in the upcoming budget. In the general fund, we've recognized approximately $945,000 in operating reductions recognized by aligning budget figures with historical spend and some savings from operating efficiencies. We plan to make some adjustments to staffing that's anticipated to save approximately $809,000. This is due to position changes, efficiencies from technology, and adjustments in service hours. We're taking a deeper look at our planned capital spending, focusing on maintenance of current facilities. And also reviewing the scope of projects to refine project estimates. And these changes will reduce project funding by approximately $5.7 million over fiscal year 26 and some 27 projections. We're also looking at adjusting funding for events to for both events and to third-party organizations. And finally, for all funds, a continued focus on operating savings and ways to provide additional revenues. We're planning further analysis necessary to review our fee structures, again, fee structures in all funds, as well as research on new revenue sources like the option of a public safety impact fee. So unless you have any questions for my portion, like these few slides, if you have any questions, not in the rabbit hole category, I'll turn it over to Jay, and he's gonna go through the financial forecast of our major funds. And the savings that I just identified in the general fund have been included in, and he'll speak to that. They've been included in his forecast for the general fund. So.
Before you go, we want to make sure we weren't too strict. Questions for clarification are important if you have.
Yeah.
So, anything before?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Jay Ravens, Finance Director. This portion of the work session is our annual required update on the financial condition and forecasts of the general fund and each of the major utility funds. Additionally, I will review a forecast for the central insurance fund due to the impact of the hurricanes. I will briefly review each of these forecasts. Please interrupt me with questions at any time, subject to their approval.
Oh dear.
I'll start with the utility fund forecast. Each of these forecasts is a similar format, starting with a calculation of net operating income, followed by non-operating items to arrive at the bottom line net change in unrestricted reserves for the year, highlighted in blue. We then provide the new updated total of unrestricted reserves and deduct the council policy required reserves to arrive at excess unrestricted reserves, highlighted in green. So essentially the equivalent of net income in blue and excess reserves in green. The Water and Sewer Utility Fund has a strong level of unrestricted reserves currently, per the fiscal 2024 green shaded $152 million of excess reserves that we began the current year with. However, these excess reserves have been fully committed to major capital projects and future capital spending. The forecast reflects that this capital spending will deplete the reserves by fiscal year 2027, creating the need for a significant bond issuance. The forecast assumes that water and sewer rates will increase by 6% annually starting in year 2026, as recommended in last year's rate study. The water and sewer utility has a very aggressive capital plan, and a rate study will be completed in the coming months to determine whether the recommended annual rate increase needs to change, as well as the timing and the amount of needed bond financings. Any questions on the water sewer fund? The stormwater utility fund similarly has a strong current level of unrestricted reserves with an aggressive capital plan forecast to deplete the reserves by fiscal year 2026, creating the need to issue bonds. The forecast assumes the 8% annual rate increases that were adopted this past year. A rate study will be completed in the coming months to update the capital plan and determine whether the bond issuance can be delayed to a future year. The Solid Waste and Recycling Fund is also in a very strong position financially. The forecast reflects a substantial hit to reserves for hurricane debris removal in fiscal 2025, with reimbursements forecast for fiscal years 2025 through 2029. The fund maintains a healthy level of reserves throughout the forecast period with no need to issue bonds. This forecast assumes current annual rate increases of 3.75% that were approved last year. The gas utility fund forecast is also based on a recently completed rate study. The current forecast indicates the need to issue bonds in fiscal 2027 due to aggressive capital spending over the next couple of years. We will complete another rate study by fiscal 2026 to determine whether any adjustments are required and to update the amount and timing of a future debt financing.
Jay, if I could
Yes.
ask a question, just for everybody's benefit.
Sure.
You talked about solid waste
Yes.
and how that, getting that money back for
Correct.
reimbursements over a span of years.
Yes.
That's because it can take as long as 8 years to get back all of your money for hurricane relief.
Yeah, I've
Is
been a
that
little
right?
more optimistic than that
Yeah.
with the debris, because usually the debris removal reimbursement happens pretty quickly. It's the major permanent projects that drag out both our expenditures and the reimbursements.
And I think the city manager told me sometime this week that we've spent somewhere around $70 million in hurricane recovery so far. We hope to get that back, but we've spent a lot.
We spent a lot, and the 70 million is over the 3 storms.
Okay.
And that's what we're projecting the total cost to be. So not all of that has been spent because as a we don't pay for projects all at once, but that is our anticipated cost for recovery.
But as I was explaining to the mayor of Treasure Island this morning, we're not going to get a complete check next week for all of our costs.
No, not at all. And we also
Some
don't
of our municipalities here in the county don't understand that.
Correct.
Their first time through, but appreciate you sharing how it's phased in.
Yeah, we don't anticipate 100% reimbursement of the 70, but we are certainly being as aggressive as we can, both with our insurance reimbursements and then FEMA reimbursements as well.
Okay, thank you.
I think we've got two more questions.
Weissman?
Yeah, so on the solid waste and recycling fund, it looks like in '27, we're getting a FEMA reimbursement for $10 million. But we're skipping 26. Is that because you're figuring it'd be 2 years?
I'm being conservative that the reality is we've already gotten the 6.2 million that shows up in fiscal 2025. On the table currently is another couple million that we may receive in the current year as the expedited debris removal reimbursement. I'm just being conservative with the balance and moving it out there to make sure that we can cover what I consider to be a worst case scenario.
And so what do you consider as hurricane expense? Hurricane expenses, you've got...
that is almost entirely debris removal.
Oh, all of it? Those two lines are debris?
Yes. I think they had some other minor damages that are included. I'd have to go back and review that, but it's almost entirely debris removal.
Okay.
Yeah, just to go backwards for a second, but not to go down a rabbit hole. You used the word aggressive twice when we discussed the plan.
Yeah.
When we're talking about water and sewer utilities and we apply the word aggressive to that, are we saying that are we identifying this as a need as a city? We need to have this aggressive plan, or is there any way to avoid that bond issuance and not be so aggressive?
I probably need to let Richard and Marcus speak to that, but I think they would defend that everything they have in their capital plan is a need.
Okay.
And they would probably identify that the need is sooner rather than later.
Good.
All of that
I would almost
considered-
prefer to hear say
Yeah.
aggressively needed.
Yeah.
And then I'm comfortable.
When I say aggressive, one, being an accountant, I'm talking about compared to historic spending, it's aggressive. It's also aggressive as far as execution, because to execute at that level of capital spending is a significant increase from what we've been able to execute previously. So there's a lot that rolls into that. It's aggressive means it's also going to be a challenge to achieve.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so to piggyback off that, and we've had those conversations, we actually had that exact conversation when we met with the consultants on the rate study, in terms of the likelihood of us being able to physically implement all of those things, because it's aggressive, meaning like it's a lot of work to be accomplished. And so on some of it, especially on the funding, and we had one-on-one conversations about that, we backed up a little bit because we knew that the likelihood based on our past ability to be able to execute at that level had not been there, and for valid reasons. It's not out of a lack of want, whether it be supply chain issues or contractor issues or staffing issues. We have not been able to execute at that level, and so we did back down, and that's why we didn't implement a rate increase at that time. But we're still. The funds are still there, and I told Rich, because he absolutely was fighting, saying he needs this money, he needs the money now, that it's there if we can execute it. So we did go through that exercise in terms of, is all of this needed, and is it all needed now, and do we think we can do it?
Fair enough. And then the last, if you don't mind.
No.
Last, without going too deep. On solid waste and recycling, do we ever divide those numbers to see a difference? Because I've had some people that have had questions. Are you on the same way?
Yeah, I was going to
I've had some people that raise questions about recycling programs. I know a handful of cities are reverting the way they handle those. Do we
They're
separate
actually
them?
segregated in our financial statements.
Okay.
So we do report in our financial statements those two totally separate, so that you can see what the revenues and the expenditures and net income for for solid waste versus recycling. And I can tell you that for the year just ended, per unaudited numbers, recycling was at a loss, and it essentially was subsidized by the solid waste side.
And the last thing I want to add on that is this conversation is focused specifically on general fund. We're going through all the funds, so you can just see the financial health is required as part of our financial updates. But you know, we completed a budget exercise for all funds, and those are some of the conversations that our team has had as it relates to recycling, and further conversations that we'll be having about is there an opportunity to do things different. So I don't want you to think that hasn't been completed, it just wasn't a part of this conversation because it's general fund focused.
Thank you.
Part of the belt tightening thing we're talking about today, and we have been talking about, is that pushing the 10-year plan for the sewer plant relocation? Or are we still in the middle of that, kind of on track for 10 years?
That it does not include, it did not impact that. There are other things that may impact that implementation in terms of when that will be completed, but not as part of the belt tightening. And please correct me if I misspoke or anything there.
Yeah, just for the challenge of executing the projects, we don't think we'll make the 10-year plan.
But the forecast for water sewer does still include what Rich and his folks have provided for required spending for that 10-year plan. So we still have it in the current plan, and as we do the next rate study, we'll be reviewing that with them to determine whether there's any change to that. But I think from Rich's standpoint, they're still driving towards that 10-year plan of implementation, and we're funding for it.
Yeah, just a comment on that. I think that's a very important project, especially with the climate change we had and the water levels rising. You know, if we ever had a Cat 5, we got 2 sewer plants underwater, which is very scary to me. So I really don't want to see anything going back on that quite yet. I think we need to move to high ground for that expansion, that 1 sewer plant, and I'm glad we're staying on track with that.
Part of that issue will be what type of a rate increase is going to be necessary per the rate study to be able to help fund that over the next 10 years. So we'll be reviewing the results of that rate study with you prior to 10/1/25.
And I think Assistant City Manager Slaughter, when we say execution is the challenge, it's not about our intentions or our desire to go ahead and finish the plan. It's about having the resources available, right? We don't have the staff to do some of these things. We can't get contractors to do it. It's more about availability of resources than our intention to do it, right?
All of the labor market,
Yeah.
all of it, the supply chains, as the manager said, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Richard can certainly speak to it if you'd like to, but it's,
Yeah.
he's committed to trying to do it as quickly and effectively and efficiently as he can.
If I, just the only thing I could add is the project management services that you guys approved a couple of weeks ago, that technically doubles the size of our PU engineering staff. And that will help us get there. You know, as I said at the time, I'd always prefer to have city employees doing that work, but that will help us get closer to that 10-year plan.
Okay. Before I move on to the general fund forecast, I do want to summarize that all of our major utility funds continue to be financially healthy, self-supporting enterprises with no subsidies required from the general fund. The general fund forecast, a little busier for you on the screen. This forecast includes estimates for future property taxes, other revenues, along with operating debt and capital expenditures used to calculate net operating income, shaded in blue. Below the net operating income is a calculation of ending unassigned fund balance reserves, and finally a calculation of reserves in excess of the minimum required by council policy per the green shaded row at the very bottom of the forecast. So very similar to the utility forecast. The general fund forecast, as the city manager indicated, includes operating and capital savings identified per the recent staff review citywide. Overall, the forecast reflects the drawdown gradually of excess reserves to the minimum level by the end of the forecast period due to capital spending and operating costs that are forecast to increase at a faster rate than revenues. An important and volatile variable in the general fund forecast is the expected annual increase in taxable values for property taxes. You'll note that fiscal years 2023 through 2025 were very strong with 13%, 11%, and 9% increases, respectively. The forecast provides for a 5% increase for fiscal 2026, 4.5% for 2027, and 3.5% annual increases thereafter. Annual property value increases above these amounts could significantly improve the forecast. On the other hand, not meeting these forecasted increases with flat or declining property values could have a very significant negative impact on the forecast. Any questions on the general fund?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, just for everybody's information, our reserves, we have a minimum reserve. Is that 8.5%?
8.5% of the next year's operating budget.
Okay. And we've pretty much been ahead of that for a while. But it looks like we're coming down right to that percentage, or we still have a little extra in there?
We're getting close to it at the end of the 10-year forecast. And the good news is we're doing that without a millage increase.
Yeah, I noticed.
Typically, this 10-year forecast has done similar. It's showed that we stay positive through the 10 years, but it's also typically required a millage increase to do that.
Yeah.
The good news with this forecast is the 10-year forecast does not anticipate the need for a millage increase over that 10-year period. The use of reserves over that period is something we manage from year to year. I would present that with the big bogey being we don't know what's going to happen with property tax.
Sure.
But aside from property tax, this is a conservative, somewhat of a worst case that we can mitigate over the 10-year period.
And I want to reiterate, that memo that we sent out, that lists all those things, that's reflected in here and why this is showing that there's not a need for a millage increase in here. So just to reiterate that we heard you all, and the team took it seriously and, made those suggestions. And, as you're going through that, you start to hear from constituents, you'll understand these are not easy suggestions to make. But we really took a hard look and tried to project what it is that this council wants us to do and wants us to focus on. And those efforts, it's significant. We've had other conversations with us where we have a millage increase showing in 2028. And so I just, again, want to thank the team for their efforts in this and also just remind the council that that's the importance of these conversations, because then we have an opportunity to react and provide you what it is that you're looking for.
Yeah. And we appreciate the team doing that. The reality is we have to live within our means as local government because we got a lot of elderly residents in Clearwater who they have to live within their means, and they're on fixed incomes because they're on Social Security or whatever. They can't go out to get it, not physically able at their age to go out and get a job to supplement whatever. And so I really appreciate the team digging in deep to see how we can do this, because it's really important to our citizens that we do that.
The next forecast is for the Central Insurance Fund. The Central Insurance Fund is an internal service fund with significant self-insurance reserves that can serve as rainy day funds for disasters such as the recent hurricanes. This forecast assumes $35 million in general government hurricane costs, and when I say general government, I'm speaking non-enterprise fund. This is essentially what If it wasn't for central insurance reserves, it's what the general fund would have to absorb as far as a hit from the hurricanes. And it assumes a conservative 50% reimbursement of $17.5 million. We fully expect to receive insurance and FEMA reimbursements in excess of this 50% level, but I've included the conservative level as a worst case to demonstrate the impact on the fund. The good news is that the fund reserves still remain at excess levels, green shading, throughout the 10-year forecast, despite the significant hit to reserves, and they build back to a healthy level by the end of the forecast period. This final slide provides a visual of combined unrestricted reserve levels for the general fund in blue and the central insurance fund in red. This provides some perspective of historical reserve levels, including a significant increase that occurred from 2019 through 2024, as well as the impact of the hurricanes on the central insurance fund. Overall, it demonstrates that we remain at a level of reserves consistent with historical levels throughout the forecast period. That concludes the financial forecast presentation. If there are no more questions.
Thank you, Dan.
You guys want to take a break for a minute, or you want to keep moving on?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Okay. So if we could turn to the agenda you have in front of you for a moment. The next item, as Al said, we anticipated coming into this that one of the things you would spend some time on would be a discussion of the tools that the city could use to stay under a need for a millage increase in the 10-year forecast. And so you saw a little bit of that. We certainly discussed those with you in our conversations. You see a little bit of that in the summary. Spreading out capital expenditures, vacancy freezes, operating efficiencies, or a whole host of those. Since then, as we've discussed and as you've heard from staff has come to you with a package of measures that will in fact keep you, as you just saw, from needing to consider or even engage with the millage increase in the next, over the 10-year forecast. So our question here is a little different than what appears on the agenda. It would be that package of measures that staff brought to you. You've had opportunities to look at it, talk about it. Do you want to spend some time understanding it better, asking questions about it, talking about it in a substantive way today, or are you comfortable with the information you've received about it and ready to move on to the longer term strategy discussion? Let's go around the table. We'll start, since you made a gesture that looked like
I just wanted to clarify, if we move on, is there an assumption that all these suggestions are supported by the council? Or can we just table it for now and then talk about it later? Because I'm thinking that these are very specific and sort of rabbit hole kind of things. Or do we have to talk about it? I guess, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we table it, is there an assumption that we're okay with everything? And move forward.
I'll turn to staff for the answer to that.
Yeah, so we need a budget philosophy. So it's probably better to get the philosophy and then decide what changes, if there's additions or deletions that need to be made based on that philosophy. It will be important to circle back because, for example, if the philosophy is to, make sure there is no millage increase that shows that to stop using general fund increases, but you want to add all this stuff back in, those two things would be in conflict. So, we will certainly need to circle back, but I think it's, putting the cart before the horse to start with the details when we haven't, decided on overarching. We just wanted to help kind of relax in that we have ideas and suggestions, because it was, we did get consensus from the council that we wanted a belt tightening, and so, rest assured, we have done a belt tightening. And so that's been accomplished. Now let's focus on the strategy, and then we'll circle back to this. So I would say no, it's not an assumption.
Okay.
And we will need direction on it.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
It won't be the only change you guys do.
Other comments?
Where were you gonna go with it?
I was
Just gonna go around one by one and be sure each of you,
Yeah.
so.
So if we're starting with the philosophical approach to
Don't
the
go there
overall.
yet,
Not
just want to
yet.
see if there's any more need to talk about this. What I took from that exchange was start with the philosophy. So we'll go there unless there is a strong sense among other council members that you want to hear a little bit more about that proposal before we do. Our suggestion, I think, would be to go to the philosophy now. If there's time at the end of today and you want to come back and just understand a little further what's in that proposal, we can certainly do that. And as Jennifer said, you'll have to circle back in any case after you've fleshed out the philosophy a little.
I am
So-
good with moving on with philosophy.
There you go.
Everybody else okay?
Well, I'll just make an overall comment on it. I mean, the approach city manager took was to ask every department to look for 10% savings, which we had to start somewhere, and I think that was as good as anywhere, a directive to kind of start the analysis. But I think that, and I think I shared with you all, the easy way to do that is just, go right through every line item in your department's budget and say, okay, 10% here, 10% here, just shave it off the top, including personnel. And that's not really what I wanted and what I think the council wanted. We wanted everybody to do what we see a mix of here in this memo, and that is look at how technology might save us some here
Well,
and other
hold that thought a
things.
little
Yeah.
bit. That's the second half of the discussion.
Okay.
I think you're-
Before we
Okay.
go there, and we will, want to talk a little bit about needs and wants and other considerations. And Jennifer, was that how that list was put together, just going through and asking?
Well, we did a budget tightening exercise. And so there was a lot of conversations around that. And, we talked about that in our one-on-ones, and so.
So we'll maybe hear a little bit more. Let's go to the philosophy next. First thing we want to ask, before you get into the how, is about the what. So the first question on your worksheet and on the agenda is picking up from one of the themes in the interviews. All of you talked in some fashion about needs and wants. Some of you talked about other things as well. As we put in the summary, several of you talked about investments already made and the cost of walking away from those. Some of you talked about the costs of not undertaking certain kinds of investments, the opportunity costs of that. So we'll open it up in just a moment, but I'd like to go around the table first and ask you individually how you think about needs, wants, and the difference between the two, and what else what else you'd like the council to be considering. So I'm gonna we'll start in different places around the table for different questions. For now, I wanna start here and just go around, and then we'll open it up to a discussion. But individually, how do you think about needs and wants? What's a need, what's a want, and what else should the council be thinking about? Council?
I think that's a tough question to answer without having, all the information in front of me or us. I think, we rely so much on staff, rightfully so, because they're so entrenched in projects and in these discussions where we don't have all of the information, and that's where we rely on such a good staff. So I don't necessarily know if it's fair for myself to say and identify a need versus a want without
Not asking for specific projects or services or anything else.
just the definition of need versus want.
Take it up to a more
Higher level,
higher level for the
project
moment.
level, just generally.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll get the-
a need, like a need is something that we need in our city to keep it safe, to keep our quality of life and our standard of service where it is. I identify, those as needs. Wants are the extras, the ancillary stuff that are outside of that big picture of safety and quality of life and level of service.
Okay. So there are a number of things in that. It's a brief statement, but details and data play a role. You need to have some sense of that. And then safety, quality of life, which is different. And what was the last thing?
Level of service.
Level of service. So safety, level of service, and quality of life are all in the mix for you.
And they overlap. I don't mean to make them
Yeah,
sound like
they
they're
definitely
separate.
overlap,
They all-
100%.
Councilman.
I like that. That pretty much covers it, but I can tell you, safety is number one. And for me, my first term had COVID in the middle of it, and a lot of the wants never got addressed or needs because COVID just stopped everything. So I kind of came out of the box this second term as, let's get some of the things we've talked about done. And for me, and I've always said this, Clearwater talks a lot about things and just doesn't ever do anything. But I think we have in the last couple of years. We've really moved along on some of the capital improvements that we really needed. So without getting into specifics, capital improvement needs definitely that haven't been addressed in a long time needed to be done.
Okay.
I think it's a real balance between what our needs are and, what our millage rate is. And, I'm glad we went through this exercise of cutting back, but I can tell you right now, and I don't think I speak for all of us, we're really not, we've got to look at the list and really look at that and say, what is really needed and what's a want that could be put off, that kind of thing. So.
Is there anything in the mix other than needs and wants? And can you say a little bit more? You talked about capital improvements that you've deferred for a long time. Anything else in the needs bucket? Anything in the wants bucket? Not specific projects, but types of things.
Types of things. Well, one of the things I think we've addressed in the last, recently, I'll just say in the last year or two, is addressing the strategic plan and putting it out there in front of people, because that was something that we never really did. And now when we spend money, when we want to address something that has a cost to it, it has to align with one of our strategic plans, which I think is really,
Okay.
I think the public really needs to have that. And that's something that I was really glad we did. And I'd like to see that carried on.
Okay, so it's another important consideration. Thank you. Mayor.
Well, first, for me, it's people. We can't have a high-performing local government if we don't have high-performing people. Yeah.
Can folks hear him in back? Okay, thank you. I'm always.
So I'm happy, and I think the council's happy that we did the pay rate study and we got competitive with the rest of the region for all of our teams. And we just reached an agreement on collective bargaining with our police and fire to try to make sure that they're competitive. So for me, people are priority for me. And it's a huge part of the budget, as was just shared with us. The challenge is to remain competitive. We've got to find savings in other places, non-people related. And when people are the majority of the budget, over half of it, I mean, that's going to be challenging to all of us as a team. As far as needs, I think it's basic services that people expect everywhere in every community across the country from their local government. It's water, sewer, streets and roads, public safety. Those basic services are needs. So, I mean, they talked about the aggressive conversion of the water plants, combining the water plants 3-1. That's pretty important because we all had the presentation and we're really, really vulnerable. And we do our best not to be a news story with the past 3 storms we had this year on spillages into Tampa Bay. We want to protect our local waters. We need to upgrade a lot of things. So that, for me, that kind of thing, that basic, that for me is a need. And that should be one of our highest, in addition to public safety, but the sewer, the water, streets and roads, those are our most basic needs.
Okay, thank you.
So in many circumstances, it's very clear to me when identifying a need versus a want, right? For example, public safety, infrastructure, staffing, that's a need. And a want is a beautification program, for example. But then there's other things that it's not so clear. And so specifically to needs, for me, that would include, especially when allocating general funds, projects that ensure future fiscal health, public-private partnerships. Any project that there's a return on investment that's tangible, that would, what I like to describe, feed the beast. Looking at our future and increasing our tax base, having more revenue coming in. It might not be perceived initially as a need, but if you look at the end product, it will be a need because it's going to, quote unquote, feed the beast. So that's
Gotta
just.
be a better term. Yes.
I call it feed the beast.
Okay, all right. So there's an in-between category there of things that will improve your fiscal health over time.
Yeah, when you look at a capital project, yes, it's just, it's a capital project, it's gonna cost, an example would be the marina, right? It is a huge investment. However, that is imperative to our tourism industry. It is revenue generating. So it's not just we're building a marina, it's actually going to contribute to our fiscal health, right?
Okay.
That would be an
It's not just
example.
Clear black and white buckets. There's kind of ins, but there's a lot of gray.
Right. And that is something that I really would like to see more of, that a little bit more of a progressive approach of how to generate more income, really looking at tangible return on investment and engaging in projects that are a little bit more innovative versus just buy a building and do something and then give it away, but actually look at public-private partnerships to improve our fiscal health. You know what I mean?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your patience. I promise I'll start with you.
No problem. So I'm going to ask a question before I dive into this. Does everybody have these 3 sheets in front of them? Okay, we do.
There's extra copies here. if you don't.
There are.
The reason I ask that is because obviously everybody heard the question. And when I think of this, I just think of the question posed by the moderators. What do we do humanistically? Each one of you, I believe, or majority of you, probably answered that in your head based on what you do and your direct budgeting, right? I'll take it to a very simple form, and that's your budget for your own life, right? You have things that are needs and wants. If your roof's leaking and you need to fix the roof, that's a need versus a want of maybe replacing or increasing your landscaping. Don't feed into that. I'm not saying certain parks or budgets are important other than just giving you an example. So when I think of needs and wants, that's kind of where I'm coming from as a guise of that. What is local government? What are we supposed to be doing for the citizens, businesses, and stakeholders? And then branching off from there. I don't think that we can get very specific yet because as mentioned by Councilmember Menino, you all are entrenched in your subject matter. You are the experts. I am not an expert in any one of the things. I rely heavily on your advice, where you've been. You know the market for what's going on in your industry and how we should try and articulate and pave that path going forward. With that being said, that's where I would like you to use that home mentality is what I will call it, and think, what is a need for my department versus a want? This want could be great, but do we need it? So that's where I would think with needs and wants, just a basic 40,000 foot view, looking down overarching, right? So that's kind of where I'm seeing
Okay.
local government.
If I could ask you to expand on a couple of things there. Citizens, businesses, and stakeholders. Can you say a little bit more about what kinds of things might constitute, and again, we're talking high level, not specific projects, what kinds of things might constitute leaky roofs for each of those?
something that pops in my head right away for leaky roofs is North Beach, right? We have drainage problems out there. Again, okay, so now I'm getting too specific. So listen, that's what a leaky roof would be. In my department, if I'm seeing something from an infrastructure standpoint, it could be from my employees, maybe I have a deficit in this area and I really need to fill this position, versus, man, my forklift isn't working over here. This is something that's really imperative for operational so that you guys can accomplish your tasks in a meaningful and productive, effective way, if that makes sense. Trying to stay at the 40,000
You
foot
can come down a
level.
little bit, you can come down a little bit. North
I can
Gate
come down
sounded
a lot of it. So I'm just trying not to get in that rabbit hole.
No, I appreciate that, but it sounds like the Northgate example, and I saw heads nodding here, is an infrastructure piece, and that's
For
for
sure.
citizens and businesses and other stakeholders. What kinds of things for businesses, for example, might be a leaky roof?
I mean, I just think you nailed it on the head right there. So when you look at infrastructure, and it goes to, again, each person is different in here. You all have your own mindset and philosophy on how local government should probably operate. And mine is very basic. I don't want to deflate anybody's sales by getting too specific, but at the end of the day, government exists to protect its citizens with basic needs. And that's why we're here. So when I think of problems that would affect a citizen and a business, it's, are we keeping their water on? Are we keeping the sewer flowing? Are we keeping, well, we're not right now keeping the lights on, but things like that, right? The important needs of what it takes to drive the businesses and drive the community. Then we branch out from there.
So let me open it up. There's some common elements to everything you said. I think infrastructure is probably one of them. You mentioned quality of life. You mentioned this gray area of projects that will feed the beast in the future, so perhaps you don't have to as directly. You mentioned, a number of different groups of folks that are affected by all this. So ask each other questions. As you listen to each other, what do you want to know more about in what each of you said? Just open it up. The obvious needs, the obvious wants, and some things that point in between.
I think what Councilmember Teixeira said is important, that for needs, we're not going to probably get the community or the private sector to participate in doing the renovations of the consolidation of our water treatment plants. But there are other things, lots of other things, that we don't have, the taxpayers don't have to be the ones to solve the problem solely. We can partner with the private sector, community donors to do whatever. An example is, we just talked about the Long Center here recently. And the example was given in Ocala that they had just put in a indoor aquatics facility, $25 million or whatever, brand new, great facility. Not a penny of tax money went in to do that. It's something the community did to improve the community without relying on the taxpayers to do that project. So I think she makes a really good point that aside from the basic needs, are there lots of things that maybe it's not wholly funded, but there's community contribution to help us do some of these wants that we're maybe not asking the community enough to participate in and support, or we maybe need to encourage the community to, rather than to look to us for funding completely to help participate and get projects done.
Okay. Is that a hand?
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to respond to both, actually. And it's quite appropriate that I'm between both of you.
Speak a little louder. I'm looking at the back of the room. Speak a little louder.
So when I listen to what you're saying and what you're saying, and I feel that there's value to what you're saying. But again, I'm the shade of gray, right? And so, yes, you are absolutely right. Our job is to, take care of the basic needs of our citizens as well as their safety. And then I'm looking at what you're saying, and I agree as well. My crux all the time is balancing that with the expectations from citizens of quality of life. And Our citizens really enjoy a great city. We do provide a lot, more than their needs. And so how do I balance that? How do I balance my constituents saying, I know it's not water, I know it's not infrastructure, but that's a service I value. That is a project that I value. And that is one of the reasons why, Clearwater is so beautiful and it's so successful in many ways. And so my challenge all the time is balancing what I feel are just the needs that I need to provide, but yet what our citizens value as well. Sometimes they're in conflict. Sometimes what we think is just a need or a want, our citizens disagree with that. And so to me, it's always like that balance. How do I provide that quality of life to my citizens without being a crutch all the time and just have this excessive spending? And so that to me is a challenge, balancing those two.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I think,
Yeah.
trying to put it in words without going too deep. I think we have to stay focused on what we want to be when we grow up, I think, as a city, and identify what it truly means when we throw words on the board that says this is our vision and our mission as a city, and it's to thrive from bay to beach. What does thrive mean in those needs and wants? We have an expectation of a lot of citizens that currently live here, that want to move here, that plan on moving here, and businesses that grow and sustain because of who we are as a city and what we've grown up to. There's a lot of moving parts that are much deeper than just our safety infrastructure and our level of services. We have over 110 beautiful parks in our city. We have world-renowned beaches. We have spring training baseball, minor league and major league. We have some unbelievable venues for the arts, from Coachman Park to Capitol Theater to Ruth Eckerd Hall. And I think all those moving parts relate to that level of service that you're discussing, that our citizens
Value.
Rely on, and that's why they're here and they pay their taxes towards. And we have to find a way to continue to provide that level of service and to live in that vision of thriving from beach to bay. But there's a cost to it, and finding that balance. And I don't want to see us get away from, who we are and just start focusing on, if we're identifying needs of safety, infrastructure, level of service, and people, we're kind of leaving a lot of what a lot of our citizens qualify as needs and make us who we are as a community. So I think there is a balance there.
Yeah, you can go ahead, and then I've got something to say on that.
Okay, thank you. So again, this is where it's tough for me, right? Because I'm trying to be vaguely specific, and then we dive a little bit deeper. And I don't want anybody in this room to think that I don't have wants or understand the wants, right? Like, I'm a human just like you. Like, I get the wants. I see the need for parks. I see the need for libraries. I understand that. I'm just giving you that vague, specific rationale of what a local government at its core should be doing. I agree, the 110 parks that we have, the citizens spoke and put value into that, but every dollar we spend on something is taking away from another dollar somewhere else. And what I can tell you, any of you have seen it, if we're being honest with ourselves, when we drive from Tarpon Springs down to the Skyway, is each one of you can point out infrastructure issues. When your car hits a pothole, when you run through the 2-foot puddle, whatever it is, you're seeing it. So what I, from the outside, looking in, see is the shiny thing before the important thing, right? I'm not saying that right now we need to cut, and I hope that's not how this is coming off. I'm not trying to convey that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just simply stating that we need to be focused on really important things that will keep our citizens, our businesses, our city, you guys, operating and running effectively and efficiently, and then continue moving to try and take care of everything we have now but invest in those other key critical areas that they're not being left to the side. So when you do see the sign, beautiful from bay to beach, that's not just because of our parks, that's also because of our roads and how sanitation's going around and making sure that our roads and parks and everything's looking beautiful. I'm not gonna hit every department, sorry, but each of you are critically important and there's a reason for that. So just because I'm not, I give you a
That's clear.
vague
That's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
statement.
Councilman, is it I apologize. Albritton or Albritton?
Albritton.
Okay. Councilman, you mentioned priorities. Clearly, priorities are implicit in what you're saying. So part of what I'm hearing out of this discussion, there are three things. One, there is a range of things that you're comfortable saying are important that go beyond the basics, but the basics are the priority problem, the infrastructure, the other core needs that maybe haven't been addressed. I wondered, so there's sounds like a broad range of quality of life issues that aren't purely wants. You said the citizens have spoken and those things are important to that, and that was implicit in yours as well. I'm wondering if, and this is getting ahead of your discussion a little bit, we'll talk about how in a minute, probably after break. It almost sounds like partnerships, greater partnerships is a need that some of you are seeing. So, and balance. Balance is in lots of your comments. Apologies, I lost track of a hand here. I don't know who this is.
I was
Go ahead.
I agree with Councilman Cotton. We're not saying quality of life is not important. We're just saying we first have to take care of those basic needs.
Yes.
And what the five of us have seen, three of us in just 10 months, is how many people come to us every week from this community, I wouldn't say with their hand out, but wanting us to dip into the general services budget to write a check to help them either solve a problem or start something. That I told a reporter this the other day. We're glad to participate as a city in the conversation, but that's a community problem. Our 1,800 employees, we can't do it all with taxpayer money ourselves. We have to solve, and we can't make the city thrive. We can't increase that quality of life by ourselves. It takes everyone, businesses and residents community, gathering behind a cause and supporting and solving problems. So that's again, just on what he said. I'm not saying quality of life and all that isn't. I mean, I've been very vocal, and I know a number of it about supporting the arts. Arts are incredibly important to the future of this community. The Sound has done amazing things getting together. I think we would just like to see a more community effort to solving these problems, because too often, and we've seen 10 months and you've seen longer, folks, they think, hey, we just go there, they'll write a check and we'll take care of it. And we've got to get out of that pattern and start doing some more of these quality of life conversations as a community instead of just local government.
Okay.
So I have an interesting poll here by National Research Center, 2024, quality of life, Clearwater. You know, most people enjoy living in Clearwater. I mean, it's a very high percentage. And also on governance, you know, there's not really any really sagging confidence in government or anything. The things that really suffer are housing options. I mean, and that probably the reason is because we have higher property values here, and because people are moving here because of the parks and all the things that we offer in Clearwater. And it's hard to find an affordable housing in you know, so it's a balance. It really is a balance here. If you're looking for a low-cost living, you're not going to be living in Clearwater. But if you're looking for quality of life, we got it. I mean, we really do. And now our issue is maintaining that. You know, the Long Center was built basically with public money. I mean, people came together, it wasn't the government that but now the Clearwater has to maintain it. And there's almost a bigger cost to maintain it than to actually build it, as with most capital projects. So I'm real happy, and I think most people are, with where they live here. Their neighborhoods are good. The thing that I see is we definitely have some spots in Clearwater that aren't as vibrant as other spots. Downtown is one of them, and we've been talking about this for decades, how we can turn that around. And what it does, it kind of affects people that live elsewhere in Clearwater. They're like, all you do is talk about downtown. You know, that's a problem area. But we don't want to forget about anybody else. So trying to maintain that balance, that's hard. And anyway, I just wanted to throw that out to say that I think that we're all cognizant of the great things Clearwater has, so we need to maintain that. And maintaining things, there's a cost to that.
So what else on this question of needs, wants, and other considerations before we go to break? When we get back from break, we'll sort of focus in on what this all means for your possible direction to staff. No decisions today, but advice to staff is more along the lines of what we're talking about today. But anything else on this question of needs, wants, and other considerations that you've been talking about? Go ahead.
Very enjoyable. Enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for facilitating it. I think we're all on basically the same page, and what we're doing is prioritizing those needs, and then as we get into the bottom end of the needs that get into a gray area of, is it a need, is it a want, is it, and when you discuss those, it's quality of life and different things like that. So I think we're all on the same page. We all highly value safety, infrastructure, people. We've invested, this council's invested in staff, deservedly so, police, fire, our leadership team. We've shown that, and I think it's important that as we continue to move forward, that we are having these discussions on how can we increase revenue streams in the city, and private partnerships obviously are discussions, maybe some of the processes that we go through on some of our capital projects where I know staff has a lot of suggestions on ways that we can drive those revenues to increase them, to offset, because the mayor's correct, is we will not, and the majority of us won't, sit into a room or a town hall and have a discussion about raising the millage rate on our citizens, especially in a climate and environment that they're living in, and so many are struggling to pay bills month to month. Meanwhile, they look at their city government, and we're increasing wages across the board to staff, our leadership team, police, fire, and we got raises not too long ago. So how do we then turn around and solve those challenges with, the easy button is let the citizens carry that burden. And I think we're all in unison. That's not fair to do with respect to them. We owe them that due diligence and that responsibility to tighten our belt, to go through exercises like this, to find ways to increase revenues. And I think that's part of being a high-performing government, and it can be uncomfortable at times. I think it definitely takes a layer of compassion, and this council has it. We know when we put staff through, these practices, that to so many it might just be a budget sheet and numbers on a budget sheet and a line item. But I know this council sees deeper than that, with a layer of compassion, and we see the lives that it affects. We see jobs that could be lost. We see home incomes that could drastically change for people, and it's a people thing, not just a number thing. So we are compassionate about that as well. But I think that we're going in a great direction as a city. We've got, they say that good organizations have a staff that has trust and faith in their leadership team, and I think we're there, but I think extraordinary organizations have a leadership team that fully trusts and believes in their staff. And I think that's where we are, so I look forward to keep moving forward with this.
Okay. Anything else before we go to break? Okay, let's take, I'm going to say take 10, we'll be, just to give you a 5-minute buffer. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and try and focus in on how you might articulate advice to staff based on this discussion. Thank you. Okay,
The draft.
so
I think of Portuguese, that's right.
There you go.
there are two sets of questions on your agenda really for the rest of this morning, and then we'll come back, it looks like, in February and delve in a little more deeply. I want to take a little bit of time and ask you, based on what you heard from each other and what you said, what is the advice to staff in terms of approaching the way it's worded here, service provision, project, and really budgeting, planning for the costs of those longer term, not necessarily this year, but longer term. What is the advice to staff? And then, given what was said earlier about the memo that was circulated to you about measures for this coming year, we do want to circle back to that. And we want to just ask you initially, how many of you, not how many of you, do you think that you want to open up that approach a little bit and tweak it? Not necessarily reach conclusions today, but do you still need to tweak that approach to some degree? And depending on how much time we have today, we can delve into some of the tweaks. If not, we'll come back to those in February. So the next question is, okay, you heard each other. Sometimes it's helpful to even to just say these things in order to articulate them to yourselves. Councilman Cotton, I will start with you this time. And I do want to go around the table as before and then open it up. So what's your advice to staff about potential approaches to budgeting for service provision and projects going forward, longer term? Not this year necessarily, just longer term. How would you pull all that together that you heard?
Yeah, I think that I'm going to stick with what I originally said, and you guys are the leaders in your department. You know your department. You had a great exercise of seeing where you could save money. Your department is yours. Treat it like it's your budget for your house, making ends meet, making sure your critical needs are taken care of. And if you can cut money and save dollars, great. And here's the other thing with that. I think in government, we think that we're under the mentality of use it or lose it, right? So if I get allocated this amount of money and I don't use every bit of it, next year it's gone. Where that still may ring true, we could save that money and put it into another department. Should something else arise that is critical and you need it and you're able to show and explain to us why you need that asset or that thing, I don't think any one of us are here would be hard pressed to say, okay, yeah, let's try and do a mid-review to where we can work that into our budget and make things happen so that we're staying efficient and providing those needs for our residents, businesses, and communities. So I guess my overall approach would still be make your budget what you personally would use for your budget at home, right? You're looking at your bank account. You're seeing what vacations you can do. You're seeing if you need that roof repair or if you can remodel your kitchen, right? We all have those things that we are looking toward. Do that with your budget within your department. Treat it like it's your own personal bank account. And I think great things will come from that.
Okay. And this is a conversation among yourselves too. You're floating advice that you would like to collectively offer. At the moment, it's just individual. Council.
I think this is a good opportunity for me to really voice my appreciation of the efforts that were put forth in this memo. I like where the direction that the staff did. And when you're talking about an annual savings of over $2 million, and then when you add the 6-year total reduction of another 5.7, this is something that I appreciate. This is a great effort. I also like the process or the focus that they used.
Can I ask you to hold that for a moment?
Yeah.
We'll come back to the memo collectively in a moment. Just longer-term direction to staff. How would you suggest they approach?
I was going into
Okay.
that segue. I would like to see a continuing of this process, such as evaluating better alignment of community needs when making those fiscal decisions, sharing of resources, another one I appreciate, evaluating the project scopes that are already in place and in the future. And then the reviewing of applicable fee schedules is also another option. So the process that they used, what they were focusing on, I would like to see a continuation of that, at the very least.
Thank you. Yeah.
A number of things. First is, I've talked about this over and over again, but just every department, everybody in every role, including our 5 roles, going through an abandonment exercise, asking ourselves, would we start doing this project or this program today if we weren't already doing it? And if the answer is no, we're simply maintaining something that we've been maintaining for years, then what resources are we taking away from other places in local government that could help our city thrive by continuing to do something or do it in a way that we would never start doing it today the same way? And I think if we all ask ourselves, in every department, there's got to be something with the age of our city that we would not start doing that today or do it the same way if we weren't already doing it. So that's really the exercise that hopefully this has started our staff, because I think that's collectively what we want them to do. And that may be different, not just this year, but every budget year, just to kind of reassess and get the staff's feedback from their individual departments on what they would do or not do. And then, again, what I said earlier about, the easiest thing to do is just say, oh, okay, we can save 10% by we'll cut 4 positions. That's not what I want. I don't want us to cut people or positions. What I want us to do, though, is look at savings in the delivery of services, the way we deliver services. For example, I'm impressed by the way, what I've heard already from my library services have come back with some ideas on the delivery. If you look at libraries, getting reading materials, that world has completely changed in the last 5 to 10 years. From when we established our library locations, the way you go, you find a book on the shelf, you check it out, the world has completely changed. Number one, I'd say maybe half of our checkouts now are not, hard materials. They're electronic reading materials. And it's an Amazon world where you go online, you pick up your book and you order it and they deliver it to your house. You don't go to the library and pick it up or go to somewhere and pick it up. So, but that's an example of throughout the entire, our local government. Are we delivering our services in a way that serves our citizens the best, but also is the most economically efficient way to provide them today? And I think if we all do an analysis of that, we'll find areas where we can not only deliver more quality, but save some money. And then revenues to the city. I know there's been, in the past, there's been a sense that the city council wanted us to give it away, to not, particularly when it came to bringing events here that might inspire economic development. And I think there's some space for us to capture more revenues. I don't want to charge the little kid from down the street more than we're already charging him to come in and use the rec center. I don't want to do that. But we do have facility users that come in from out of town, like the Clearwater Marathon this past weekend, which was a fantastic event. And those event operators, they expect to pay fair value for the services they're using from the city to support their event. And in the past, I think we'll foot the bill with the taxpayers to support those events because it's good for the city. And I think we need to look across all departments, not just Parks and Rec, to say, are our fees consistent with what other cities recover to provide those same services, to be fair to the taxpayers and also support other things that we're doing. So I think, and the other thing I would say is in every department, we all have procurement activities, just to make sure that in today's world with electronic bidding and all those things, that we're just making sure we're getting the best prices in our procurement throughout the city. 5 of us, we have folks come in. I don't know if you had a chance to see it on YouTube before you came into Clearwater today, but we have folks who come to our council meetings and talk about every penny we're spending and how it's outrageous and how we're not getting the best price and why is it going there and there. And 99% of that's unfair, but it doesn't relieve us from the duty to make sure we're always getting the best vendors at the best price and it's competitive bid. And if we look at our processes and improve those, I think that's another area where we can again save money.
Okay, thank you.
What he said.
What he said. Okay.
No, I think it's a good practice for all departments to always realize efficiencies, and all employees should find ways to save money. And their ideas may be out of the box, but the heads of the department should listen and possibly find ways to do things that are more efficient. Using technology. A lot of things, as Bruce was saying, they're easier now with technology. They're not as cumbersome, and if they can pass that savings on to, the people that we serve, that's a good thing. When I was first elected, FTE was just a dirty word. They didn't want to do, the city manager at that time didn't want to even talk about 1/2 FTE hiring because there was a lot of money. But we got into a position where we needed to really have better staffed departments to do the job, and I agreed with bringing it, the salaries up to at least 75% of what everybody else is doing. I mean, it's amazing to me, everything is just going up. And, luckily, because most of our budget's based on land value's been going up, so we really haven't had to raise, the millage because the land values are going. But still, to the average person, that's more money out of their pocket. So we need to find ways that we can help offset that. Also, our enterprise funds, and it's mentioned in here, maybe we could find ways to bring in more money that way as well without really raising basic rates, but again, using technology, maybe there's ways that we can bolster, the bottom line on all that. So I think we've got a good start here. The last financial thing that I saw, about 6 months ago, was millage rate in 28. Now we're stretching it out 10 years if we can. A lot of things are based on that, like property values, but if we can do that, that's a service that I think everybody will appreciate, as long as it doesn't cut back on a lot of the things that make Clearwater, Clearwater. Why people enjoy living here, because we do have a lot of things other communities don't. So I think we've started a good process, and I'd like to continue that.
Okay, thank you.
All very well said. Agree with all of it. Don't need to circle back and touch on everything. I think an overarching theme is that we need to focus and concentrate on what we currently have and maintaining what we currently have, and whether it's capital projects or parks or infrastructure, roads and things like that, take care of what we have before we start venturing outside of that to add to what we have. Let's ensure that we're thriving beach to bay with what we do have as of now. I appreciate the projections, as council member said, and it's nice to see a millage move, but I also say that I don't believe that a frozen millage rate for 10, 12 years is necessarily, should be looked at as a win. So many of our community, Mr. Johnson would probably tell you his property values doubled in the last handful of years. Therefore, your taxes that you pay have doubled, and your ad valorem taxes. So what we can say that a millage staying the same is great. It is. We're never raising it is a good thing, but our citizens' property values have been going up, and therefore they are paying higher property taxes. The projections are awesome, but there's so many moving parts in it. We don't know. We're under pretty tight inflationary pressures. We have no idea reimbursement rates, and we take conservative approaches of 50% and less. We have no idea of how the real estate market is going to perform going forward. We're pretty reliant as a city on revenues from our property taxes. I think as we saw a 3.5 estimation is definitely on the conservative side. So, I mean, while we look and see this very conservative picture on so many moving parts, shifting on any of those can drastically kind of change that picture, and I respect that as well. But I think strategies, finding additional revenue sources is very important, whether it's the delivery and how we deliver projects, whether it's public-private partnerships, whether it's our efficiencies and finding the ways that we operate as a government more efficiently, more effectively, whether it's being more technologically savvy as a municipality. I think all are very important.
Couple of questions. As you hear each other on this, do you think you all sound consistent with each other?
Yes. I would say yes. I mean, there's variable differences, but I wouldn't say that there's major difference here that would be earth-shattering or quaking. I think that we're all basically on the same page.
I think overall, yes. I just think that there's just slight variations on certain topics and different degrees of prioritizing or definitions that need to be homed in. But overall, I would say yes.
Okay.
I do want to make a point that was brought to my attention several times over the last 2 years. I understand our citizens are under duress with the millage rate. Like you said, you were talking about how the values of the properties are going up. So even though the millage rate stays constant, you're still out of pocket more. But I don't want to ignore the citizens who don't own property, right? And those are the renters. And so, one of the things that affects every single human being is utilities. Everybody has to have water. Everybody has to have electricity. So we're focusing so much on the millage rate. I just want to at least go on record acknowledging that we also care about those people who rent, who perhaps are feeling like, hey, there's so much focus on the millage rate. What about our utilities? The utilities are used by everyone. Why are you not looking at that? So I just wanted to go on record saying that I acknowledge that and I recognize it, and it's something that I would like to consider further.
Okay.
Let me, on that though, don't be mistaken, those folks who are renting, they're paying, the millage rate affects them. Because if the property owner, they're paying more in taxes, guess what's going to happen to their rent? The rents are always, I've seen the recent numbers the past month. I mean, the rents are not decreasing at all throughout Tampa Bay. They're continuing to climb even throughout this most recent crisis. So the millage rate definitely affects renters.
It's not as direct and it's not as perceived as it is.
Yeah,
So,
but it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilman Holbrook?
Well, and I want to add that I don't know the amount of properties in Clearwater, but in Pinellas County, there's 407,000 parcels that are homesteaded. And, homesteaded properties only go up 3% a year. So I don't know what we have in Clearwater, but the majority of people that live here are homesteaded. So that really doesn't affect them as much as the renters or people that have second homes or businesses, that kind of thing. Just wanted to throw that out.
Okay. Let me ask another follow-up question. So before I do that, I think we will try and synthesize this guidance and bring it back to you at the next workshop and tweak it and see where some of those variations are, where some of those different emphases are, and try and firm it up a little bit. But before we do that, some of the things you've talked about, operating efficiencies, vacancy freezes, are things that can be done immediately. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the time frames for some of the other more innovative strategies that you're describing. What would be your expectations in terms of if the city were to fully explore those? How long, what kind of time frames would you expect?
Are you hitting on the aspect of technology affecting departments?
Technology, partnerships, additional revenue streams. There are a number of things in here that that can't be implemented quite as quickly as a vacancy freeze. And I'm sort of curious, as you're talking about these, what time frames do you come to mind? And nothing definitively here. We want you to talk to each other about what your expectations are, and that's part of it. So, and it may not be definite. You may not have thought it through. And that's fine.
I don't think you can group them all together.
What's that?
I don't think you can take every idea or innovation idea and group them all together. I mean,
No,
they're all
no.
going to have different implementation. The trick is to start implementing them. And some will take time to really see a difference, and then there are others that are low-hanging fruit that, you know, we've talked at public meetings about just the use of the green at Coachman Park. I think we're charging about the same rate for use of that space we charge for event space use at any other park around the city, and that's a unique venue. So that's one where we could probably adjust our usage fees for that. That would be an immediate, change. That we've talked about for parking. We talked about considering charging for parking at events downtown Clearwater. We weren't ready to jump on that immediately because concern over getting the sound going and all that, but with more activity that we've seen lately, I might consider that too. I think for a long time, we've probably been undercharging out on Clearwater Beach, particularly during the spring for parking. So I think on some things, there are some immediate short-term benefits, and then there are others that will be a process of 3 or 4. But for me, it's just to know how the other feel. You all can weigh in. For me, it's about beginning the process on all of it. And some will be short-term yield. Some we understand will be long-term. But to get them going, and over time, we will achieve a lot of savings.
Okay, I think here, and then here.
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment, wholeheartedly, because I don't think we can just put a one-size-fits-all approach on this, right? I think that it's almost like each issue should come to us, and again, that's where we, as the policymakers, look to you guys to know your departments and where these things can be cost-effective. Where is that low-lying fruit? And yeah, we see certain things. The parking, came to mind, and that's just areas that we are experiencing in our lives through the city, or that we see when we're combing one portion of a budget. But that's where you guys would know where the quick fixes are. How to put a time frame on everything, I just don't think that that's realistic, right? I think that we're seeing AI, artificial intelligence, really start to pick up, and as that picks up, be looking at how that could incorporate into your department and help you be more efficient or streamline or fix processes, arrive at conclusions quicker. And listen, we all know technology has gremlins, right? So this is something that's new. It's a new emerging technology, and that's why it's hard to put a time frame on something like that, because you don't want to be the first one to it, but you don't want to be the last one to it. So there's that gray area. Me and the city manager have talked about that, right? But as long as you're taking the blinders off, and like the vice mayor even said earlier, is looking for those ways to be efficient and thinking outside of that box on efficiency. And to what I said again, I will drive it home. I think government was stuck in the rut of use it or lose it. Do not have that thought process. If you're able to save it, save it. And then if you have a valid concern for something your department needs, bring it to us, right? Like, let us make the decision to try and make you guys the best department for the city overall, so everybody's winning.
If I might add on to what I said before, Vice Mayor. When I'm saying this, and I think I speak for the other four, we are in no way saying any of our staff are inefficient today. Okay. None of us are trying to say that. None of us are saying that you're not already professionally doing all these things. But we also know that some of you have come in the last 4 or 5 years, and you have inherited things. You have inherited ways of doing things that you wouldn't start doing if you were leading that department today. So, but I want to just make sure that everybody understands, at least for me, and I think the other four, we are in no way saying that all of you are highly professional. We love all of you. You all do a great job, and we appreciate the work you do. And we're not in any way trying to say that you're not already trying to operate efficiently. We just know that with local government, sometimes you can inherit things and have to feel like you have to continue some things that maybe don't make sense.
Okay, so what he said, I mean, really, and
That's
I
why
don't
he's
know,
the vice mayor.
I don't know how many times we have to repeat this, but staff does an incredible job. You know, we have these emergency situations, the hurricane, you guys stepped up to the plate and just, what you did in Clearwater just blew everybody away. All down the beaches, they're still scrambling to figure out what to do. And, you know, we got Clearwater cleaned up pretty quick. And it was hard work for you guys. You were working around the clock, 7 days a week to do that. And I've always noticed that departments work with each other in Clearwater. I've always seen that. That's a great happening, because instead of saying, well, that's not my department, you guys jump in and you help each other, which is really good. But, you know, everybody has a different way of seeing things, and if you listen to somebody that's maybe saying, you know, here's how we can improve this, I think if everybody listens and maybe tries something like that, that's how things get done better. So I think that is a really good way of doing it. But you know, these new things that happen, they seem to come up 2 or 3 times a year, are great. Like I'll give you an example with FDOT. You know, the photo by tag now. They don't have the stations you go through to pay a toll. You're not paying somebody to collect the money. It's just a license plate, boom, and they got it right there. Park Mobile was a great thing to have, because the same thing. It's all done a lot more efficiently. Now, public facing, it's a little difficult because we have an older generation. Sometimes they don't even have smartphones to do that. But I think we have to look at each thing and try to see if it can be implemented, maybe not right off the bat, like Councilman Cotton said, but after all the little tweaks are done to it, then it may be something we can look at. But I think that's what we ought to do.
Okay. One more comment.
Okay, first of all, yes, you're 100% correct, Art. We do know, we have an absolute amazing staff. I know we all sit on, you know, regional advisory boards and things like that. Pre-storm, I'd walk into some of these meetings, and they say, boy, what's going on at City Hall? You guys have a mess going on there, or whatever it was. And we would deal with it, and it is what it is. Post-storm, we walk into some of these meetings, and the first thing he says is, your staff is on it. Well, you guys did amazing during the storm. Their performance was, how did you do it? And kudos to you. So thank you for, I walk into those meetings a little more proud now as I roll in there than I did to talk about fishermen and stuff. But to circle back to your question, I don't know when it comes to technology, innovation, delivery models and processes. I don't necessarily think putting an expectation on that is fair, because it is pretty broad. But I do think that what it does do is we need to kind of change our way of thinking and the way we approach things. And I don't want us to sit into a place and the answer is because that's how we've always done it. And that's not always the best answer, as we know. I know Councilmember Cotton and myself last council meeting had a lot of questions about a CMAR versus a construction administration. Are we duplicating services? From us neophytes, it seems like it. We read and we see, oh, we could cut and chop and do this. But when you stand up, Marcus, and you give us the reason of cost effectiveness, the ease of delivery, the output and performance is better, those are the things that make sense and why we're not there to poke holes or find fault. It's, I think, the same thing we're doing with these discussions is to change our approach and our way of thinking. Is so often of government being kind of thrown in a box in the way of thinking is we have higher expectations. We have a great team. We have what we think is a pretty good council, and we should be able to perform at a higher level than what surrounding us does. So I think there's no expectations on it, but the expectation is to kind of change our way of thinking and having the green light and being innovative to how we approach some of these challenges.
Okay. Yes.
So in regards to the timelines, I agree with everyone. This is really should be project specific, right? But having said that, having closely watched Clearwater's government in the last 10 years and being involved in the last 2, I have to say how pleased I am in the change of the culture. It has been adopting more of a private sector culture, meaning being more assertive, not waiting, adopting a mode of being more productive and self-evaluation and being more thinking outside the box. And I would like to see that continue, and I think that's going to affect the timelines, right? If we adopt that private sector assertiveness, approach versus the government approach, which is slower, which I acknowledge some of it is necessary, right? We're dealing with taxpayers' money, so there has to be regulations and processes that you need to follow. But if there's sort of a middle ground where the snail pace and the warp speed of the public sector can merge a little bit, and I think that's a trend that I see. I see it in the leadership. I see that there's this an innovation and a difference of culture that's being adopted I am very pleased with. And I think that should continue. And if it does, I think that's going to affect our timelines as well.
Okay. So what I heard in all of that was a lot of detail that I'm not going to try to summarize, but 2 things that did jump out. 1, there are some low-hanging fruit that many of you see. And 2, it sounds like you are, for those other more innovative things, looking to see the process change, to see the culture change further, without necessarily having specific expectations for when that would bear fruit. Obviously, sooner rather than later from your comments, but you're looking for process and for culture change rather than specific time frames on those items. So this is a very preliminary discussion of your guidance to staff. We'll try to go a little bit deeper in the February session and also try and firm it up a little bit. In the meantime, though, I do want to circle back to that memo, to that shorter term process that, or the results of the budget exercise that staff went through. And ask a couple of questions, and I want to acknowledge that staff probably does need, not today necessarily, but out of this process, before you get to the formal budget process, some direction on some of the variables they tweaked in the exercise to get to these numbers. The numbers are somewhat unforgiving in the short term. So do all of you have access to that memo, either electronically or on paper around the table?
Yes.
Mayor, do you have it?
I do, yeah.
I saw a couple
Ryan,
of
do you
you
have it?
calling
Yeah,
up
I'm
your
just pulling it
iPads.
up. Yeah.
We,
Pulling it up
we
here.
forwarded it to you.
Again, I had it
Yeah,
up.
let me get it.
Okay. So take a moment, I'm going to ask a couple of specific questions about it. Take a moment to refamiliarize yourself with it. I don't know if you need staff to go over it again. They went over it earlier and have, I think, talked to you about it individually. But that's certainly doable if you'd like that kind of recap as well before we open it up. So take a moment and look at it. Find it.
Yeah.
Just sent it over.
Okay.
It's already up here. All right, window.
Yeah, this is the summary
Yeah,
version is on a
yeah.
slide on the screen, but that's
Yeah, here.
very much the summary version.
Yeah, I've got it.
So,
I see some reading, so.
yeah, let's give you a minute to go through it.
Did you get it, Mike?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm ready.
Give you another minute or so to look it over. Okay. All right, so for today, I at least want to ask, how many of you think that might still need some tweaking for this next year? Don't answer yet. So that's the question I'm going to pose to you in a moment. Would any of you like staff to go through that again, and would you like to have an opportunity to ask questions about it before we get into that question of whether it needs tweaking or not? Do you need, and some of you have time to spend with it, others have had less. Okay, so I'm seeing at least one person nod.
Can have some questions as well.
Okay, so
You want to do questions, or do you want to do, because I want to be respectful of time, I know we've only got about like.
I want to touch on each item and just ask if there are questions for clarification. If there are not, we don't need to discuss it. And I don't have it in front of me, I'm afraid. So I'm going to have to rely on staff. So let's just go at item.
So they're in, we kind of have them in buckets,
Yeah.
Okay.
and so,
So if there are no questions on an item, we'll go right by it. Okay, hold on one second. Are you starting at the top?
Well, for me, it's, and generally, I don't have a problem with them. It's not very specific, though, so when you get down to talking about, and Councilmember Cotton, last budget cycle, had questions about the line items, exactly, when you say you're gonna cut FTEs, what FTEs? And so we probably have some disagreement, or maybe agreement, or, advice to the staff on specific FTEs that would be eliminated. But in general, I don't have, if that's what you're asking, I don't have any questions.
Yeah, we're looking for the general sort of level. You will need more detail before you sign off on anything. So.
I think the buckets, personally, feels like we're on the right track.
Okay. Are you looking at these buckets, or are you looking at the memo?
I'm looking at the memo.
yeah, so, and
Okay,
they're
okay.
aligned, so like the
Yes,
first one
yeah.
talks about the department operating budgets and, in general, items that are gonna, be impacted by our belt tightening. The second one is specifically about the budgets. The information is in there specifically about the positions that we're talking about. We also have the conversations in our one-on-ones about the specific departments. So there's 2 departments that are impacted by this. One is the library. That's where we discussed about rearranging hours.
Yes.
And being closed on Sundays, and the additional hours, so the net change would be an hour. And the result of that is, I think it's 7.5 positions. So hopefully that's, oh, okay, I thought you were asking me to hold on for a second.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Hopefully that's ringing a bell in terms of our conversations. I know we discuss a lot. And then the other one, the other department is the police department, where we talked about the technologies and stuff have changed, and so it's the report writers. And so there are, I think it's 4 part-timers in that one, and 1 full-time position that are impacted. So again, those specifics are in that memo. There isn't anything additional that's being proposed in terms of cuts outside of those. If this is something, that the council is interested in terms of us doing.
Well, these are fine for me.
Okay.
When I just said what I said, because I heard that there were other FTEs that might be eliminated outside these here or proposed, so coming into today. So, but if this is all we're proposing, then this is fine.
So I can clarify that. So no, there's nothing else being proposed at this time. Again, when we're trying to figure out budget philosophies, right? So you all were able to see what these proposed changes do to our 10-year forecast, okay? But we've had conversations about, starting from the desire to not have a millage increase up here on our 10-year forecast. We've also had conversations about not relying so much on general fund reserves to balance the budget. On that 10-year forecast, it still shows using the general fund reserves for projects that we had planned for to do that. So, what we are looking for from a team, like from a budget preparation standpoint, is what we've done enough. Is it, I think, Councilmember Menino was saying that, yeah, this is good, but, do we need to go further with that? And so we have, because of our budget exercise, we have other options that are needed if we need to cut more. And so that's what we're trying to understand from the council, what is the budget philosophy? Are we, for what these impacts do to our financial forecast as a starting point, is that good? Or do we need to look further? If we need to look further, yes, there could be potentially additional cuts. If we don't need to look further, and this is a good starting point for us, then we would not be proposing anything additional. I hope that clarifies.
If that's the question, then, and I promise after this I will quit, jumping in first. But if that's the question, for me, I agree with Councilmember Menino. I would love to find so much savings over a span of 2 or 3 years that we can consider reducing the millage. I would love that. Our citizens would love that. They need it. My problem is with talking about that now is the reality of having spent $70 million on hurricane recovery and not knowing what our property values are going to do here in the short term. And so I would love to plan for that, but I think to be cautious and conservative right now in the moment, I think that trying to plan for no millage increase right now is the smart thing to do, conservative thing to do for us, for the citizens. But absolutely, I would love to get to a point. But I don't think right now we can plan for that out. I think we need to be conservative. We need to plan to, and I'm very happy we've gotten it down to where we're not forecasting a millage increase. That's huge.
The Vice Mayor first, Councilman Menino, and then Councilman Teixeira.
All right, I just have a general question. On number 3, reductions of planned capital improvement projects. Moccasin Lake Nature Park stormwater repairs, does that any way relate to the standard apartment flood that we had?
Both of them went like this.
Maybe.
Yeah, from a larger perspective, perhaps, and that's something that we're looking into long term. Go ahead.
Well, I think when we look at the issue that happened to the standard, I don't think you could identify necessarily one particular thing that was the fault of Moccasin Lake. I mean, we're certainly evaluating the entire scope of projects that are all associated with the stormwater runoff in that particular area, and we believe there's maybe even issues as far down Alligator Creek near the mouth of the bay that could be causing issues upstream significantly. There's other projects that Marcus was talking about this morning, you could talk to it even more specifically. I think this even talks about more reallocating where the funds are coming from as opposed to necessarily eliminating any attention we would give to Moccasin Lake. I think
Okay,
that's
well,
important.
mine just
This
says-
is about relieving it from the general fund. We believe that that is more maybe a project that should be paid by the enterprise fund of the stormwater fund.
Okay,
So
okay.
this is about taking the project out of the general fund, not eliminating the project.
Okay.
That's your fear.
Well, that's kind of where I was coming from, because I didn't want to see 900,000 eliminated with something that might have been an issue with the standards. So if we're taking it from other sources, that's fine.
But I heard Commissioner Scott and Peter say the other night that the county's looking at Alligator Creek and the county participating in it, helping to alleviate that problem going forward too, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know, Marcus, if you want to talk about it.
No,
No?
hold that thought.
Rabbit hole.
I want to go to,
Rabbit hole.
Councilman Neal, you're next.
Almost stepped in it.
Go ahead.
Or,
Yeah, she can go, I'll jump after.
Well, with all things considered, I think this is a great start, and I'm satisfied with it. There are too many variables, and I think it's too soon to make very solid decisions on the next 10 years because there's so many variables. We don't know what our FEMA reimbursement's going to be. We don't actually really know what the ramifications are to our tax base regarding the new properties in the beach. What are they going to do with renovations, fire sales, and all that? We've seen in other communities that were that have had this happen to them previously, had a significant dip, but then it rebounded. But we don't know if that's going to happen to us because it's a different world right now. So there's too many variables for me to make a major decision that long far off. But what I see here, I'm very happy. It's a good start. I think that I would, however, like to just have the opportunity to hear my colleagues' opinion on the pickleball, only because I've gotten so many calls like I usually do about pickleball, and I think it warrants at least a discussion.
okay,
That's where I'm coming from.
right here and then.
I would love to have that discussion. Okay, so just for clarification, while Menino did mention that I don't think we need to shoot streamers and plan a party if the millage stays the same for 10 years, I do not think it's realistic to lower it in where we're at. So don't take that the wrong way. I wasn't saying this needs to go further. In fact, I'm very extremely comfortable with what has been presented to us. It almost, for my comfort, it almost may go too far. And I'm only saying that because my point to saying everything was so many moving parts and being so conservative is that we're looking at a 10-year forecast. In 2 years, we're going to look at a 10-year forecast and it could be drastically different. Mm-hmm. So I'm comfortable, even if we said that millage was, now it's beyond 10 years, if it was 8 or 9, I feel that while I want it gone, we have enough time in front of us between now and then to continue to tighten the belt, to continue to work towards that goal of eliminating, right? So I didn't want that to go the wrong direction. I'm extremely comfortable with this. Regarding pickleball, if you don't mind, I thank you because I was going to say it, and my question would be, if not this project, which one would be next? And I say this particular project in particular because I do receive a lot of calls from our countryside community that feel there's definitely a lot of discussions with the city and this council on Clearwater Beach, and storm recovery is definitely warranted. There's a lot of discussions regarding downtown, and understandable with where we're at with development, but there are aspects of our community that are equally as important that sometimes feel like they might be left out, or statements may be said of, it's Countryside, they're fine, they have everything they need, when I don't know if that's true. So my question would be, if not this project, what, and maybe Art could speak to it, why is this project, picked in Countryside? Is there some significance to it? Is it a definite identified as a need versus a want? If he wanted to speak to that.
Go ahead.
We can have him speak to that, but I do want to take the other two comments first, because I think that probably will develop. So let me go to Councilman Cotton, Vice Mayor, and then back to pickleball.
Yeah, so I'll say this is a great start. From when I first came in, a few months ago, to looking at having to raise the millage by 2028 to this, you guys have done a great job. And I'm going to beat the dead horse. Don't stop, right? I think that this should be an annual exercise that we do, but if it's me and I'm a director of it, I'm going to constantly be looking for ways to be more efficient. I don't want to be considered that wheel in the cog. That's just my mentality and how I operate. I'm always looking at how to be more efficient, make things easier for myself and my people, and how that can go. Because if we're able to lower the millage rate, I am all for that. I don't know how many of you, or if any of you live in Clearwater, but you guys know what the cost of living and what it's like to live in here. Imagine your millage rate going down a little bit. Who's going to balk at that? So if you're able to be efficient and find those intricacies within your department, beating the dead horse again. Cut it. Do the savings. Let's try and pass it on to our taxpayers. And if there's something in your budget the next year that needs to be done, as long as you make it make sense, I don't think anybody's going to balk at it. So don't stop being efficient. This is a great start.
I want to warn you, though. You lower the millage rate, that's easy to do. Raising it back up again, like if you have a little spike, it's going to be the toughest thing you ever do. So you got to watch what it is and make sure we're not lowering it on a whim, because next year, when you need it, raising it's going to be tough. And I also want to bring up this. I think this is good, and I think it's a lot better than the 28 millage rate increase, because we're pushing it out, which is always good. But I want everybody to know that in 4 years there's a new council, maybe, and every 4 years they have a different idea on how things are going to go. So we can be conservative and we can push it out, but not necessarily how it's going to be when we get to that point. I just wanted to throw that up and let you know. I mean, I hope everybody gets elected again, but I've been through it a couple times, and I've seen things that we've planned that just kind of go down the tubes when the new council comes in. So just wanted to throw that up and let you know.
I want to go back to pickleball, so
Oh, well, mine's not on pickleball.
No, go ahead.
No, please, Mr. Menino, next.
No, go.
All right, well then I'm gonna go. So here's the deal with that, right? I am okay with us getting to a point where you're being efficient, we drop the millage rate, and then you make something make sense to me, and me making the decision to re-raise it should we have to. Because here's the deal, you give me a valid reason to stand in front of constituents that makes sense and I can tell them the why and what it's affecting them, they shouldn't have a problem with it. We're all realistic human beings, right? Make it make sense. It's when there's government overspending that we're all sick and tired of, that's when there's the issue. And I completely understand the warning, I get it. I work in government, I understand it, right? I've literally knocked the neighborhoods so I don't lose my job, right? To keep funding. So I just want you guys to know that I'm not scared to fight for you as long as you're making it make sense for me, right? That's all I'm asking for efficiency. So I get the ebb and the flow of things, 100%.
Pickleball. We've got a few minutes, and then I want to summarize a little bit of what's implicit in your discussion so far. You wanted to hear more about the pickleball courts.
Yeah, so because you're asking in terms of like why and how, it was a philosophy in terms of I've heard a lot of it today of maintaining what we have. And so the pickleball course in Countryside would be a new amenity to add out there. And so then there's new maintenance. There's it's an add. And so and that's why, again, the budget philosophy is important. I've heard a couple of different ones just in here, all very well articulated, but if the theme is maintaining what we have, well, then we're not gonna be bringing forward adding new. If the theme is to, make sure that we are, keeping an eye on the millage and make that does not occur, again, we're gonna be doing so by not adding necessarily things that are new, and while looking for efficiencies and while also looking for ways to increase other revenue sources. And so that is why it was picked. It's why a lot of, the theme in here is maintaining what we have and what we absolutely have to do, trying to define those wants versus needs.
And for me, that totally makes sense, but there's other projects outside of just that. So my question was, if not this, what? I mean, Edgewater Park, State Street Park, there's other parks that we have on the docket to spend money on. So I was just asking, if Art would speak to it, or if you could, on what, the significant importance of it. This wasn't just, hey, there's a couple pickleball people in Countryside that had asked for a court. When's the last time we spent money in Countryside? When's the last time we built something there? Is there more significance to this line item than just a dollar amount and don't expand versus Edgewater Park or other parks?
And I think we're missing the point, talking about pickleball courts in Countryside. It's not about that. It's about our parks and recreation assets throughout the city. It's about racket sports in particular, and how pickleball courts in Countryside fit into our overall plan, tennis courts, racket sports throughout the city, including the McMullen Tennis Center, which used to be a jewel, but now, over the past number of years, is not quite the jewel it once was. And how do pickleball courts in Countryside, adding them, fit within our plan for racket sports throughout the city to perhaps generate more revenue from use of these courts? You can teach tennis lessons on any of our courts in town and not pay any fee to the city for doing that. You just go on and you teach. I think it's a broader question, and I think there are ways to do. I think you even, City Manager, somebody said that there are ways to get these done outside of maybe general services budget to serve that community. But I'd like to see a broader discussion on racket sports in general. Our company, we work with, Cape Coral has a racket center. It's pickleball, brand new. They put it all together. They have a plan for how they do that and how they're going to pay for it. And other communities around the country are seeing the surge in pickleball demand, but not just court here, court there, but seeing how they are handling racket sports throughout the community. And so that's what I would like to see.
Okay. Comment here, then we'll hear from Fedora. And then I want to summarize where you are, because you've got 15 minutes or so, or a little bit less.
So really quick, when I read all this, and I read about the pickleballs, I literally groaned. I'm like, oh, pickleball. Because let me tell you, in 2 years of city council, I've had more citizens to be heard on pickleball than millage rate. I mean, that's how passionate people are. And those people are the people that I represent, right? And when I did the knocking on doors on Countryside, one of the number one things I heard was, we're the stepchild. We feel ignored. And I know that geographically that plays a role, but that's a valid concern. And so what I'm just saying is, let's just take a breath and see if not, maybe just postpone it, because this is one of those topics where, the people that we represent are passionate about. And when you look at statistics like pickleball outnumbers tennis and golf together, so I'm not saying hard yes or hard no, but I just think it warrants a discussion and maybe consideration of maybe postponing it, or maybe having staff ask for a replacement, because those two major points is, over the 2 years that I've been on council, that is one of the most communicated things to me, how important that is from a community that feels ignored. And I just don't want to dismiss it.
Okay. Art?
Well, I'll simply say that there is a need for pickleball courts in the city limits of Clearwater. We have basically, we've identified, we have 4 courts right now that are for pickleball. Solely, that's it. The rest of them, what we try to do to meet that need is to use the tennis courts that we have. We have basically put lines out there for them. We also had McMullen that you talked about. It is not as robust in tennis as it had been in the past. Tennis has changed. Sports change over the years. And so now we've converted pickleball courts out there, and we're looking at basically the future of McMullen to see whether or not we need as many tennis courts there, and now we can convert it to pickleball courts. Obviously, McMullen is a revenue generator for the city. Doesn't cover all the costs, covers about 60% right now. We certainly can have goals to try to make more money in that as a revenue source for us. But our master plan was just completed. It was the #1 need that was asked for throughout the city. We are opening 6 more pickleball courts on Clearwater Beach, which are already going to be packed, and we've already I'm going to have an employee that actually sits out there for the first couple of weeks just to handle the rules and regulations, so we don't have fights and everything else going on.
It's probably smart, actually. It's probably very smart.
We've worked on the beach. All of our indoor recreation centers have pickleball programs in there. If you came in this morning, you saw pickleball being played indoors. So, and I understand too what you were saying, Mayor. Obviously, it's the bigger look. Do we now take something like McMullen, work in a private or a partnership with someone to come in to operate that? That's one of the things in the past we have actually put forward. Is one of the reductions could be you take McMullen Tennis Complex, you turn it over like we do to our golf courses. The city owns 3 golf courses, but we don't operate any of them. Okay, we already lease those out. What we forget too is that I've been here a long time, and in 2008, 2009, we went through a terrible economic downturn. And at that time, there were tremendous cuts through all departments, not only including Parks and Rec, where we lost 55 FTEs during that time. Guess what? Those 55 FTEs were never put back. Now that means that there was a level of service that time. We changed the level of service. We basically closed restrooms, which we've not opened up. We cut lights off on tennis courts. We reduced service levels at all of our rec centers, the timing and all those things. And so now you're faced with that again as far as what we're trying to bring forward too. But I understand what you're saying. As far as the pickleball courts, I believe there is a need. As far as Countryside specifically, we have started to put some investments back into Countryside at several of our parks. Their own, basically we're trying to maintain things. One of the reasons this is in the cut, just like our city manager shared, was simply because we were looking at new things rather than maintaining what we had. That is new. I think it's needed. I think we need more than just those in Countryside. But I do understand what the mayor's saying. We have an issue, an opportunity at Stevenson's Creek Park, where we have lawn bowl and shuffleboard. We're having to deal with some issues there. It's in a flood zone down there. That's a beautiful piece of property, something we can look at in the future too, which I'm saying we are looking at that, and I think we're hearing you. At least I'm hearing you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me try and summarize some of what was in that conversation. One, sounds like you want to see some options on pickleboard. More information, contextual information. So that's sort of been put back on the table in some fashion. Backing up from that, I think we heard that while some of you expressed that you would love to see the millage rate come down, you don't think it's realistic for current planning to push for that. You think what's been done with the millage rate so far is very good. Some of you even expressed some flexibility on that if there were a need. In addition, we haven't talked about this explicitly. You've all said you're very comfortable with this as a start, very good start. There is a level of use of reserves in this approach over the next 10 years. Some reserves were deliberately set aside for future projects. There is still evidently some use of reserves beyond that, although as you saw earlier, you're well above, for the time being, the required minimums. So did not hear anything different on that in your comments. So in terms of direction to staff, no need to push harder on millage rates for now. Okay, and this is tentative. This is not a decision right now. I'm trying to summarize what I think I heard explicitly or implicitly. We'll come back and test it in February. On reserves, you're more or less okay with the way those have been used here for now. And you want to talk about pickleball courts and racket sports generally. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, yeah, so long, I'm okay with using the reserves to some extent. I do caution the community that we had 3 storms last year, and we talked about $70 million out of pocket. We hope to get a lot of that back, but we had tremendous damage from Helene particularly, and we have still not yet had a direct hit. We got lucky on both of those. I mean, Helene, as bad as it was with the storm surge, it was 100 miles off coast. And then Milton, we got lucky with that it went a little bit south of us. So if we think, $70 million for the storms that came through, we need to be careful to make sure our reserves are healthy, because if we had a direct hit, like we're talking about just with the current state of our water plants, we're going to need healthy reserves, potentially.
Okay. So any corrections to my summary in short term? Okay. Councilman, you good? Okay. Councilman?
No, clarification, I've never played pickleball before. I'm not on the sponsor team or anything, so
Your
I'm not
next-
standing on the shield of pickleball.
Your next meeting should include a field trip.
Exactly. Horseshoes, just a different story. You know me and horseshoes.
Not your Achilles.
So, I think we're coming right up on 12 o'clock. You do have the meeting evaluation at your table.
And I stress on that one, take a second to add comments, not just
Look
the
at you.
ratings, a quick snapshot, but to ensure comments that are more informative to us. So something you like that worked, please let us know that.
There you go.
If there's something you didn't see that you wanted, let us know that. We'll use this in talking with staff and setting up your next workshop. So we value those.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Okay,
guys.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it very much.
Hopefully a good.
And once you've done your evaluations, you're free to go.
Yeah, just leave those there.
Yes, I believe so.
You need formally adjourn us?
Oh. The meeting is now adjourned.
What do you say?
What he said.